Minecraft, but it's made by me. In this video, I'm going to try to remake Minecraft's world generation as good and efficiently as I possibly can. There's funny moments, there's confusing ones, and at the end, a whole lot of success. This was very fun to do, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to me. It would help me out a lot, and enjoy the video. Now, since my goal is to make Minecraft's world generation as good as I possibly could, I needed to start with a script named WorldGen. Then, starting with some basic variables so that I could control the size of everything, I started making the actual world generation. All I needed to do was iterate through the entire world size and make every single block a certain height depending on its location and a bit of something called purlin noise. Basically, it helps me make hills in the terrain, which are important so that everything doesn't just look flat. And after a little while, I was able to generate a chunk, although it wasn't very big, and it still had a few problems. And after accidentally flattening it, here's some nice terrain. It actually looks quite decent, but there's one big problem. If you take a look at me looking around, you can probably see that it's really laggy. The reason for this is that every single block is a separate object rendered by the game engine, and currently there are over 10,000 objects, so it's really inefficient and laggy for the game engine to render. The solution for this is to render everything as a single object, but there are a few problems with that. First of all, I want my terrain to be infinite, and it would be a lot harder to add and remove sections of the world object to load and unload the world. Also, there's a practical limit to how much world you can have on a single object, so I couldn't even do that anyway. The solution to this problem is to have everything split up into small bits of world called chunks. Those chunks are much more manageable to work with, and can be easily loaded and unloaded separately from other chunks. The size of the chunks doesn't really matter too much, apart from the amount of world that you can have in a single object that I talked about before, and a bit of size problems when you're saving and loading. I just chose a chunk size of 16 by 16 because that's what Minecraft does. The only problem with this method is that it causes a bit more lag when generating it, and it is really complicated to do. It was even more complicated for me because I didn't want the game to render all of the blocks inside the chunks that you wouldn't even see. Doing this requires a lot of calculating, and although it's pretty simple math, it can add up over time, and it's just really annoying to get right. Doing those two things combined took a long time, mostly because I was being a pancake head and not testing things out in the way I should have been. Here are some neat moments from when I was making it. Obviously, everything was working out perfectly here. Here, the game tried to generate Waffle City instead of what I wanted it to. Here, I accidentally implemented triangle mail armor. And here, after simplifying stuff a little bit more, here is it working properly. And after re-implementing the world generation, you couldn't tell the difference between the laggy version and the non-laggy version, apart from the better performance, which I'd call a win. Next was a task that definitely took way too long. What I was trying to do for the chunk generation was something called multi-threading. Normally, computers can only execute one task at a time. This means that the terrain generation freezes your game for a second before letting you control again. This is obviously not pleasant, and the way to get around it is called multi-threading. This allows you to run multiple tasks at the same time, but it can also cause quite a few problems, especially because a lot of things can't run on a thread that's not the main thread that most things are running on. This means there has to be a lot of crazy stuff going on, including lists, queues, dictionaries, and just other stuff that is too technical to talk about. But writing all of this over something like 3 days led to my longest script that I've ever written, I believe, at 983 lines long. But after multiple days of work and all those lines of code, here's what the world generation looks like. As you can see, the terrain looks pretty good, apart from it all being just one color. It barely lags at all when generating it. And finally, since it renders one chunk at a time, it looks pretty cool when all of them are rendering in sequentially. The thing I had to do next was to make chunks load and unload around you when you moved around, so that only the chunks around you would be rendered in. I had already sort of tried to implement it, but it was really inconsistent, and half of the time the chunks wouldn't unload. While I was doing this, I also realized that my game was becoming quite laggy even with the render distance of 2, which lets you see barely any of the world. I eventually discovered it was due to a bug I had where some chunks were being generated multiple times, sometimes upwards of 10 times, which explained a lot of the lag that I was experiencing even with a tiny render distance. This was the byproduct of the multi-threading that I was using, and I hadn't noticed what was happening when I was doing the multi-threading. So I inadvertently let that bug slip by, and I was having to deal with it now. Fortunately, the fix for this was pretty simple. I just needed to make a list of chunks that were being generated at the moment, so that the game could know to not try to generate them again while they were being generated. And after I fixed that bug, the game was not laggy at all, with my typical render distance for Minecraft of 16. But although the game ran smoothly, it was still pretty boring. Every block had just a gray color, and Minecraft has way more colors than that. There's grass color, there's dirt color, there's wood color, there's leaf color, there's all sorts of colors. So I needed to add at least some of them. Adding different block colors is actually pretty easy. I just needed to make an array of all the different types of blocks in the game, write some jumbled code to make programming everything in easier, write some code containing various terms such as dirt minimum depth and noise.getSimplex, write a shader that let the terrain actually show the colors, then write the code that set the proper colors for the terrain, realize that I kinda did something wrong, and then finally, here it is. That actually wasn't all that simple as I said it was. Oh well, it's now much more colorful, and I think it looks pretty good. After messing around with the terrain generation a bit to try and make it look a tiny bit better, I had one final thing I wanted to add to the game, and that was caves. At the time of this recording, Mojang is releasing snapshots for the new 1.17 Caves and Cliffs update, and I felt like I couldn't make Minecraft these days without at least having some caves. I didn't really care if they were super good caves or not, I just wanted caves. They're kind of an integral part of Minecraft, and I wanted them in. And I'm going to ignore the fact that although I talked about adding integral parts of Minecraft, I didn't add breaking or placing blocks, which are, I'd argue, even more integral than caves. However, I did try to add breaking and placing blocks, it just didn't work very well, so that's why I didn't add your ability to do that. Alright, back to caves. The way I generate the caves, and the way I believe Minecraft generates some of its caves, is that it uses the same noise function that it uses to determine the heights of its terrain, and it just uses it in a 3D space to determine what should and what shouldn't be a cave. However, Minecraft does its caves well, and currently, I wasn't exactly doing top-notch stuff. Like, what even is this? It looks really cool, but it really wasn't what I wanted, that's for sure. But soon, after realizing that the function I was using was wrong, I almost got the caves working perfectly, apart from the fact that they were just repeating everything. Fortunately, fixing this was pretty easy because I had just forgotten to do some code for a certain axis. You probably didn't understand that, but it doesn't matter if you understood it. The caves actually look pretty good. Even though there's like a bunch of floating sections and there's still quite a few problems, they look decent. And yeah, I was just about done. Unlike for most of my videos, there's no download link in the description because I felt like there wasn't enough stuff in my game for a download to be worth it. I'll probably work some more on this game later, and maybe then I'll release the app. But for now, sorry there's no download for it, but the terrain's pretty cool. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to go check my other videos out and maybe subscribe. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Bye!